About 2 years ago, I played a game that I had seen for years but never tried, Dragon Quest. Like many people, the first thing that stood out to me was the protagonist that looked like Trunks from Dragon Ball, and the primary mascot, that blue, smiling slime that one of y'all even have as a profile picture. I knew then that I had planned on taking a deep dive into this series, and I would later go on to play the Erdrick trilogy whenever they got a 2D HC remake. Initially, when I went about my Dragon Quest study, wanting to gain deeper insight about the lore or the character development or timelines and all of those things that you research when you do a video like this. That way I could talk about the psychology behind it and all those other things. However, the main thing I learned about Dragon Quest from playing Dragon Quest XI, the Erdrick trilogy, and now the subject of this video, is that Dragon Quest doesn't really have super deep lore, it doesn't have crazy character arcs, nor does it have deep psychological and profound moments. It actually is just an adventure. No crazy side quests like in Cyberpunk or wacky Fallout NPCs or any of that. It's just an unnamed protagonist who is often just named Hero, and the gameplay that hasn't seen an update since the Cold War. I'm not kidding. Not even a year goes by, and that's when I would finally understand what Dragon Quest is really and truly about through the lens of Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. But before we get into that, let's get into what the culture of Dragon Quest even is and why people love it so much. Before I continue, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. It helps us grow. The year is 2000. The world didn't end, and a new era of gaming is on its way. With this new era of gaming, many old faces have to appeal to a new, younger audience of the time. One of these very old faces, even in 2000, would be Dragon Quest. It was a series featuring Yuji Horii writing and world building, and the perfect artist to draw such a world at such a scale, Akira Toriyama. During this time, Dragon Quest VII is coming into a world where it has to go against titans such as Suikoden 2, Wild Arms, and Final Fantasy VII. Games that not only strive to create grand adventures, but even challenge how an RPG would even be played. In a world like this, DQ7 decided to stick to its guns and didn't depend on just its characters, but also the finesse, rather than complex tactics and early design. This would lead to a new approach for Dragon Quest VII, one that would not only push the system to its very limits and divide the fan base. DQ7 not only held true in its gameplay to the previous games, but it distinguished itself from them based on its originally very long opening, which I'm happy to see has been cut while maintaining some of the length and its episodic nature. This is not a journey towards destiny, but an excavation of it. Dragon Quest VII unfolds as a sequence of recovered civilizations, each episode a self-contained elegy, asking the player not to advance, but to remember. This is where the game becomes one of my personal favorite Dragon Quest games by comparison. These games are no stranger to familiarity. In fact, arguably, they capitalize off of it. The familiar Akira designs, the familiar RPG classes, the familiar RPG combat, and a story that doesn't hold twists and turns around every corner. However, this formula seems to really shine when it comes to having a game with an episodic nature. This makes the story feel unique, and it makes Akira really show off how much he can design and how exuberant his designs truly are. That being said, DQ7 does still have core concepts and an overarching narrative. These are found on each page of the fragment, filled with different stories in the book. Dragon Quest VII was not universally embraced. In fact, upon release, it was one of the most divisive entries as mentioned previously. To understand why, you have to know a little bit about the year 2000s, where RPGs were evolving rapidly. Cinematic storytelling was taking center stage, spectacle mattered. Games like Final Fantasy VII had already reshaped expectations. Players wanted more momentum, immediacy, and grand arcs. Dragon Quest VII responded by doing the opposite. The original famously took hours, and that's something I'm glad is not a part of this remake of the game, and was also divisive with the fans at the time. That original intro lasted like the length of a small indie game, and it was actually unreasonable in my opinion. Then there was the structure of the game. Rather than being one singular narrative, Dragon Quest VII unfolded into sequences, isolated stories, islands restored, conflicts resolved, and the game moved on. The emotional resets between the arcs made it difficult for some players to feel connected to any long-term narrative. Then there was the problem of what's called the length of the game, and others call value, but I call it a lack of respect for your time. I'm glad that the game has been shortened, and I think that makes the experience better. It's a game that's defined within its multiple stories rather than just one overarching narrative. These stories revolved around a principle that defines Dragon Quest VII: restoration over progression. At first, the sensation feels familiar. The world expands, and then it grows, and then it opens. But unlike traditional RPGs, this expansion doesn't come from venturing outwards like the previous games into an existing map. Instead, the world unfolds backwards. You uncover the past, and only through the act of remembrance does the past take shape. Each restored fragment becomes a foundation, layering history into geography, memory into space. The result, a paradoxical design. A world that grows larger not by distant travel, but by the depth uncovered, where the smallest map becomes vast through time itself. This genuinely had me at the edge of my seat, waiting to see what the next world would be like, what other tale it would tell. Some of you older fans may be upset that there are worlds and stories missing, and after playing these, I understand why you'd be upset. I mean, heck, even a few of these experiences missing, or a few of these places missing, I'd be upset too. However, as a fan who was introduced to Dragon Quest through 11, this is the perfect length of a game for me. Other ideas quietly shape Yuji Horii world, chief among them the inevitability of history, events repeating themselves, and the slow and uneven way in which humanity can grow through time. Dragon Quest VII does not simply just present conflicts, it allows you to witness their echoes. You may see brothers turn against one another, comrades fracture under pressure, entire communities split by a single decision. But the game never lets us see these moments in isolation. When each chapter closes, you return to that same land in the present, and you're confronted with the consequences that were left behind. Has the cycle been repeated? Were the people remembered? Or were they erased? Did their bloodlines endure? Or did time itself move on without them? Dragon Quest VII asks these questions again and again, not through exposition, but through the absence, inheritance, and the quiet passage of years. These are the questions Dragon Quest VII quietly asks of the player. Questions framed not through lectures and spectacle, but just through the unmistakable visual language of Akira Toriyama. His style, instantly recognizable, yet remarkably restrained here. That even feels like it's less of an aesthetic choice and more of a choice to see time through the lens that Yuji Horii wishes to paint. This world, which can be understood from these designs and storytelling, is a balance with humanity. To characters who are simple, but their simplicity carries emotional weight, and to Toriyama's art that does more than just decorate the narrative, it communicates it. It's the same visual philosophy that once inspired me to name my own character in my playthrough Gohan. Designs that feel lived in, approachable, and enduring. Dragon Quest VII visuals don't merely accompany the story, they tell one of their own. At its core, visually speaking, Dragon Quest presents humanity at a distance, softened by time and simplified in a way that honors memory, and deliberately stripped of spectacle. Even the protagonist reflects his philosophy. The the one that Yuji Horii and Akira are portraying here. Instead of the regal purple turban or the cool blue armor associated with the legendary Erdrick heroes or the Zenithian heroes, he wears something closer to a modest Minish cap, something that you might also almost see in Zelda. He doesn't look mythical, he looks ordinary, almost like he's a side character in his own world, and yet he is the central figure. Personally, when I knew nothing about this game, I honestly thought Kiefer was the main character of the game, just based on how much more his design stands out than the main character. And that restraint, I believe, is intentional, and that design reinforces the game's commitment to humanity and humility, and its commitment to scaling down. It's not the grand prophesized chosen Erdrick, it's a story about restoration and about stepping quietly into history rather than conquering it loudly. The simplicity of characters and the simplicity of the world is grounded and unembellished and deeply human in the stories that it tells, even with the crazy designs of the creatures themselves. From a gameplay perspective, because I have to talk about this a little bit, it's a lot more modernized than what the other Dragon Quests were. You're able to actually see your party in this game, and it brings it closer to a Dragon Quest XI experience and gameplay. The mechanics of the combat are traditionally RPG. The characters, while it's basic on the surface, you have a new thing that you can do called moonlighting, which allows you to have two jobs, meaning you can create a more specified build than just a mage or just a warrior. And this also goes into how the game feels very smooth. So when I play the game, even though I'm playing a game that is basic in terms of its gameplay, the frame rate and the visuals make this game feel really smooth because the game looks really good and it feels really good to play. If you're looking to get into Dragon Quest and you're new to it, 7 is a great entry point. It may not offer the grand sweeping journey of the Zenithian trilogy or the Erdrick trilogy, but what it trades in scale, it replaces with intimacy and charm. The game is deliberate without being long-winded, something I deeply value, and something that's unbelievable to say about Dragon Quest VII because it was known for its long-windedness. However, the reimagined Dragon Quest VII does not overstay its welcome, and genuinely makes me look forward to Dragon Quest XII, and makes me want to go back and try out Dragon Quest XI with a new perspective on things. If you've played Dragon Quest VII, I'd love to hear what your favorite experience was, and if you made it this far, thanks. Your support genuinely helps us. Until next time, peace.